So welcome everybody to the virtual chapter for June 2020. It's a lovely day here in the neighborhood. I hope it is lovely where you are as well. In our virtual world and here at my virtual lake, I'm having a great time. Something I learned in my first hypnosis class, of course, close your eyes and go to the beach. I have to keep my eyes open for this. So this just takes me where I need to be. We are recording, as you know, and that means that the recording will be available tomorrow. I guess we could have said this beforehand. It'll be available tomorrow around about noon or so. You can find it on the Virtual Chapter Facebook group. You can also find it in the Virtual Chapter YouTube channel and on the IACT IMDHA forum, the Mind Matters forum at the members website. So
we're entitled to CEUs for joining us tonight too. So tell IACT IMDHA that you've been here. You can tell all friendly organizations that you've been here, and they'll give you CEUs as well for the time you spend with us.
Excellent. And by the way, for those of you, if you're not members of the virtual chapter, because people find out that we're here in various ways, but the virtual chapter group on Facebook will keep you posted every single month, letting you know who our speaker is going to be and how to log in and all of the good news that you need to stay in touch with the virtual chapter. So virtual chapter on Facebook as a group, and come and won't you be our neighbor? So with that said, we've got a couple announcements. I'm doing the board certified hypnotist course for IACT and IMDHA this weekend. It's an online course. All the details about that you can find out at iact.org or imdha.com, but it is Saturday and Sunday, standard kind of working hours, 9 to 5 or something like that here. And if any of you want to join us, please do. And how about these conferences, Karen? Did you see the list that I've got for us?
I did. You made up a great list. Hypnothoughts in August, 14th, 16th. Galaxy of the Stars online, IMDHA. That'll be on August 26th through 27th. Mid-America in Chicago, the 16th through 18th of October. NATH, that is the
National Association of Transpersonal Hypnotherapists.
That's it. That's in November in Virginia Beach, the 6th through the 8th. And then HEA is in November in Orlando. That is the Health Education Association or Hypnosis Education Association, or I believe it's Hypnosis Education Association.
It is that. It's the Hypnosis Education Association. I'm their president, by the way. I was their president 16 years ago, and I am their president again. So it's exciting. We had a meeting. We had our last meeting on March 14th.
Wow.
And we didn't realize what was happening. I think at the meeting, I actually remember some kind of jokes about it. Sean Michael Andrews was there as well. And we were deciding whether we should touch elbows or shake hands or what we were supposed to do. And 3 days later, we were sitting back going, oh my God, we never would have done this. So so that was the very last outing. So our next one is in November here in Orlando. It's going to be a great time. So I think that's all I've got. How about you, Karen?
That's all I've got for now. So let's jump into it.
Why not?
Yeah, I'm so excited. Tracy Barrett Adams is joining us tonight. She's a clinical hypnotherapist, childbirth educator, hypnosis instructor, and trainer. And a third of Tracy's hypnosis practice is devoted to working with fertility, childbirth, and beyond. She's a mother of 4, a birth assistant, a veteran childbirth educator. Tracy's intimately familiar with the real-world challenges of labor and birth, and she's thoroughly committed to equipping parents to move through challenges with calm and confidence. How cool is that? We're going to hear a bunch of those stories coming up in just a minute. A third of Tracy's practice dedicated to seeing clients in private hypnotherapy sessions. She specializes in medical hypnosis for chronic pain and migraine, insomnia, and anxiety. And she also enjoys working with clients on resolving issues with eating, confidence, and sports performance. The remainder of Tracy's time is focused on training practitioners in hypnotherapy. She's a certified trainer for the International Medical and Dental Hypnotherapy Association and the International Certification Board of Clinical Hypnotherapy. And she teaches for the Hypnosis Practitioner Training Institute. That's a huge resume. So how did you get into this? How did you get here? How did it all start?
Well, it goes way back to my childhood. No, it does. some of you may have heard this story, but yes, I became a hypnotherapist starting back when I was a little kid because I went to a dentist who used hypnosis for doing all the fillings and all of the things. He must have gone to some weekend, now I know he must have gone to some weekend seminar for dentists. It must have been trendy back in the 60s. And I had gone to, when I was a little tiny kid, my mother marched me to what was known as a pediatric dentist, who turned out to be this terrible villain who committed crimes against children. Fortunately, not really me. He wasn't very nice, but he was just like really mean to kids. And so he got run out of town, but I didn't want to go to the dentist for about 5 or 6 years. I was cavity prone, and my mother was diligent, and she ended up having to drive me 3 hours to see this guy who did hypnosis. And he spent several sessions with me just sitting and talking. Now, as I think back, I must have been about 8 years old. Between 6 and 8 was when he was really doing the hypnosis. And I just remember him taking time. I would watch a little movie, like a cartoon, in my mind. He would get me completely numb. He had a button on my arm that would make me stop salivating altogether, a button on my arm that would make me have no peripheral blood flow in my mouth, and a button on my mouth that would make my mouth completely numb, where I could feel pressure. And he did a lot of cavities, did a lot of drilling, a lot of dental work on me over the years. And so I just had this obviously very strong belief system in hypnosis as something that could be very effective. And it never was not a part of my awareness. And then as a young adult, I had an experience that was pretty traumatic, and I ended up in a hypnotherapist's office for one of those. It was just a single session that just really clicked for me. And so I had the concept of how it could be valuable for processing things like big emotional trauma as well. And then I was starting a new phase in my life and found myself at dinner with a group of people that I didn't really know very well. And one of them just happened to mention being a hypnotherapist. And at the time I had been doing some work that was interesting, but it really wasn't it was like what I needed to do to put food on the table. And I said, you can be a hypnotherapist? How do you get to do that? And I had no idea that was even a thing. And I'm like, oh, well, I don't care how long I have to go to school. I don't care what kind of commitment I need to make. That's what I'm doing for sure. And then I, of course, started looking into it and went, oh, well, there's a lot of options, and none of them involve like that as nearly the commitment of time that I thought they would. So that's how I got started and really looking for training at that time, and really knew right away that I wanted to do medical hypnosis because I was so sure that was a benefit, and that just was a clear cut path for me. So.
And then you gravitated specialized even more into hypnobirthing.
Right. Well, I had 4 children. I had 4 children before that, including twins, and I had a pretty problematic pregnancy with the twins. It was one of those situations where I needed just a lot of special care to not have them come early. And it was at the dawn of kind of a wave in the 80s and 90s of natural birth. And so that was really being promoted. We'd gone from kind of automatically medicating. It was a little window actually of time that then it got eclipsed again later. Mm-hmm. But I was really fortunate at the time to have progressive providers. I learned the value of a good story and how it affects how we experience our birth, how we experience any big experience. My mother had told me the story of my own birth as hilarious, that now when I think of it, it's like, wow, that was a lot of stuff that happened there. That's actually kind of scary now that you think about it. But the way she processed it, the way she told it to me it was great. It was wonderful. And that really was helpful. So once I became a certified hypnotist, a hypnotherapist in Seattle, I knew that this was an area that it would be easy to specialize in because I'd already practically gone to school for, midwifery by the time I'd had my twins. So it was natural. It was a natural choice. And so from there, started doing group classes and teaching groups. And I worked with a colleague, and together we probably, I think between us, had classes where we ended up teaching over 3,000 couples, I believe. We keep coming up with different numbers. And therapists are very good at math, but we think that's about what it was. So, and then in the mix of that, as that practice was developing, really developed a strong interest in working with fertility because I was working with people who are having babies are all kind of the same generation. And so would be working with somebody for childbirth, and they would tell their friend they were seeing this hypnotherapist. And, you know, for fertility, that's one area where there actually is a bit of research and evidence that shows that it's effective and helpful in conception, especially with artificial reproductive technology. So it's a good companion, and there's actually data on that, which is unusual for, you know, for hypnosis to have something that's a study that says, look, this is what the evidence shows. So that's how I got into this. Why, and you know, it's just built from there. And I have a program ended up developing through all of that a program for fertility and for birth that I feel is contemporary and kind of meets the needs of a lot of different kinds of people who experience hypnosis differently, and taking into account that everybody's birth is going to be different, that they're not kind of a one size fits all. And then from there, the postpartum time of the time after baby, where there's a huge physical, emotional adjustment to be made. And hypnosis, self-hypnosis for that is amazing. So
we were kind of joking about this before we actually started recording, but we were talking about weddings and you know, weddings and then births and the cycle. I am a little curious about this, the breadth of this field, because you mentioned fertility, and then of course there's the hypnobirthing, and I'm just a little curious, is there something that comes after that? Is there sort of a new families kind of work as well that's involved with?
Yeah, I have a whole program for that. It's a whole postpartum program, that time after birth, working with parents, particularly with the mothers who've had their babies, but using hypnosis to move through that transition of kind of having a whole new role in life. Even if you really, really wanted to be a parent, your body's changed, your thinking's changed, the things you're responsible for are changed, and you're not getting any sleep all at the same time, making that whole big adjustment. And you have taking care of another person, and you're kind of becoming another person too, whether that's by choice or you just as a surprise. We become a different person when we become a parent. And I think this is true for anybody who becomes a parent, but for the person who is actually having the baby come out of them, the person who's carrying the baby and having the baby come out, that is a particular shift in identity.
Yeah, that is a parent.
That is a parent, yes. Yes.
Nice. So, because I brought the subject there, I realize now, of course, that I've begun the conversation at the end. So I wonder if we could go back towards the beginning. So before you do hypnobirthing, you also do work. I mean, you do fertility work.
Right.
So a logical place to start. So and you were telling us a little bit about how you got involved with that. Did you take a training or something in that area, or is this something you researched, or?
I did a lot of research about it. Sherry Gilbert many years ago did a fertility training, a hypnosis for fertility training, and I did her course as well. And then beyond that, just kind of really was fortunate in that one of the first clients that I had really spread the word and went to her doctor, and who was actually on the East Coast in New York. And my client moved to New York while she was pregnant, and told her whole family group and her doctor, and brought it up at every occasion. And this was before everybody had a Facebook group, I guess, but that I kind of was fortunate to be able to begin sort of networking in that way, and saw an awful lot of clients for fertility just through that initial connection. And you know, everybody that comes in with this is different, unlike with birth, where you're preparing for something that you got to set a set of variables that you're preparing for, but everybody's usually coming in with the same essential set of possibilities. And with trying to get pregnant, or people who are working on that, they're coming in from a million different places. So that's the to me, there's on paper, a logical connection between working with fertility and working with birth. But the person who is, the fears that a person who is working to get pregnant carries versus the fears that somebody who's wanting that one big day to go well are really different.
Yeah. So I imagine there's got to be lots of issues that arise, and both in the fertility work as well as just in that whole period of pregnancy. I guess what I would say is at what point typically, because if people don't come to you for fertility, at what point typically would somebody seek you out, and where would you get involved with them? At the very beginning of the pregnancy typically, or does it happen down the
Well, sometimes, but usually if I've seen people for fertility, then I'm usually working with them through their pregnancy.
Right.
So that's just a commitment that I make to them. And if I've worked with them through fertility, I'm not going to let them, I'm just really reluctant to cut them loose to go and venture into the world of other kinds of childbirth education. I mean, I don't, knowledge is power. If they want to do other kinds of childbirth education, that's fine. I just also want them to make sure that they have some good hypnotic training for their birth.
Well, and even if you're not working with them for fertility, I think anybody that's on the way towards becoming a parent,
yes,
is likely to have a million different issues come up other than just the how are we going to handle this birth, but maybe doubts, or do I want to do this in the first place, or oh my God,
around getting pregnant. Absolutely, yes. There's that. Once people are pregnant, people become pretty focused on the millions of things that they have to do to welcome that baby. So all the stuff they've got to buy and pay for, and all the classes that they've got to take, and that remodel. I can't tell you, of the thousands of people I've worked with, how huge a percentage of people are remodeling their house, buying a house, moving to a bigger place during that time. So we all know what, just even that alone, what that entails. And so my experience is that people will, because working with hypnosis for birth really means doing some integration of self-hypnosis techniques in a muscle memory kind of way, that people will usually wait to begin really doing that work until they're in that last third of their pregnancy. And if they start, if I ruled the world, I would say they would come in and do a few sessions at the very beginning of pregnancy to really set their mind in a direction that's going to take them where they want to go. And then in the middle, they would start really doing the physical training. And then towards the end, we'd really concentrate on that deeper hypnosis. But in my experience, that's just not feasible for most people. They're just not able to focus in that way. Most people are not that intentional. Sometimes it comes up, but that's not really my market for that. Most people with hypnosis for birth are wanting to do some version of a structured class or some version of a series of sessions that's going to give them the information that they need and prepare them in a pretty not hypnotherapy, more kind of a protocol kind of a way, kind of a programmatic way.
So when I was pregnant, and at that stage, I didn't know about it ahead of time. I didn't know anything about hypnosis at that point, but I did find out about Lamaze.
Mm-hmm.
What is the difference? Because now looking back on it, Lamaze was hypnosis. So what's the difference?
Well, that's a great question. And it's so funny because I just was asked this question today. And so my pat answer for that, if a client asks me that, I say, well, this is what hypnosis is. And if you really want to know about Lamaze, you want to talk to a Lamaze instructor, and they're going to give you the best answer. For you guys, I can say that probably the real difference is that with hypnosis, we're really looking at a whole host of shifts that are about speaking purposefully to the unconscious mind about resetting expectations and using some hypnotic methods that are very direct and very indirect, using metaphor, everything from metaphor and story to shift the expectation from this is something I'm bracing to cope with and prepare for, to understanding what's going on in the body and welcoming that as something that's positive, and welcoming knowing that we have the tools to work with that. I too took Lamaze when I was pregnant with my kids, because that's what was available, and it was the best thing out there. Absolutely.
That's right.
Yeah, it was the best thing out there.
And it was hypnosis.
It was hypnosis.
Or it is. It is. I mean,
yes, it is. I don't want to knock anybody. I would say for different strokes for different people. And some people really, I think, are utilizing Lamaze and getting what they need from it. In terms of the difference between the two, though, hypnosis is using breath to oxygenate the body, whereas Lamaze is using breath to cope with sensations. Really a different thing. So it's a shorter, more panting breath. And
distracted away from the pain. As the contractions start breathing, man, you concentrate on that, you don't feel the pain, and poof, there you go.
Right.
Yeah, it's a distraction technique.
Right. And hypnosis is less about distraction and more about welcoming and moving through it, doing some things in the body that help to make labor more efficient. So we're really having a conditioned relaxation response. And that's, I think, there are probably 3 pillars of what we're really working with. And that's a physical relaxation response that's reliable and that's dependable, and that is keeping us from accumulating tension throughout labor. Most healthcare providers or midwives or doctors are used to seeing the progress of labor as those contractions get stronger and longer and closer together, that it forms kind of an arc, and like, this is the point where it's almost time to start moving baby down all the way out. And what providers are used to seeing is a person's physical tension and emotional distress and mental incapacity to increase and follow that same trajectory. And what we want to do with hypnosis is have that physical progress happen like this, but have the path, okay, my emotions are holding steady, my physical relaxation, I'm letting, after each one of those big contractions, I'm letting all that tension go. I don't need to carry it. And then, and keeping the thoughts essentially away from the front of the mind. So the analytical mind is free to move to the back, where those instincts can move to the front, that can help us to actually respond to what's happening and welcoming that. So those are some fundamental differences. It's just the actual type of breathing that we're doing, the way that we're setting our mind is a bit different, and then working with the body rather than kind of disassociating out.
And if I understand it, Lamaze is a technique, as opposed to what you do covers. As we started talking, there's much more to what you have to offer. Whereas Lamaze seems to be centered around the act of birthing itself. Is that
right? True? As far as I know. Now, again, it's been a long time. It's been a long time since I've done Lamaze. I just remember tennis balls in a sock. A lot of what I remember. And but I remember I think, Michael, yes, that is correct. And what I do and what most hypnosis for birth programs are going to be doing is not only building that framework of dependable physical relaxation using hypnosis, dependable emotional calm using hypnosis, dependable kind of freedom from runaway thoughts and freedom from distress signals, and interpreting those as a welcome thing, as a welcome state. We're also really creating a system for self-advocacy and a system of knowledge of, this is what you can expect, and this is how you can create a positive collaboration with your provider. This is how we look at this going into it. So rather than dreading that experience, we are leaning into it and recognizing the progress of labor as a positive, and not to be something to be shrunk back from. So, and there's also, it really requires, I think, at its best, hypnosis for childbirth really includes elements that support people being able to create a safe place for themselves wherever they're having their baby. I will usually say that the hospital or the birth center or your home, wherever you're having your baby, we want that to be a safe place, but that's really where your provider is. That's the safety net. And you are responsible for creating the safe space. And that safe space is something you build through repetition. So it's not just like, oh, we're experiencing this, let's use this tool. It's really a whole mindset and a whole approach and way of being in that birth.
And do you work with couples primarily, yes, or just the mother?
Usually couples. Occasionally I will work with someone who is single, or that their partner isn't an option to work with them. And so, I would say I have about 10% of people who are single parents, or they're not attending with their partner. Mostly though, it is partner. And there's a lot for partners to do. And there's so many ways that partners can be of support. And simple act, as you know, as hypnotists, the simple act of just relaxing your own vocal cords when you're speaking sends that message of relaxation. Just helping them know, those partners know that they have something to do that's going to be helpful. When at the beginning of the class, often those partners will say that what they're most worried about or concerned about is not knowing what to do on the day. And so giving them some things that they will practice and be able to do. And then really the first thing I teach them is a breathing technique that will relax their vocal cords, because just being able to send that simple, relaxed voice is going to be so helpful for their partner, to let their partner know, remind them that they're in a safe place. So just like we do, they become hypnotists.
Mm.
Yeah.
Angela, you got a really great question. Rather than me read it, how about if you open your mic and ask it?
Good.
This is a good place. This is a really good place to do that.
Well, now you asked about a breathing method to relax the vocal cords, so I'm curious about that also. But my original question, so if you could just, if a little bit of that, do you ever talk about the listening child? You know, we hear a lot in regression of the child in the womb hearing
Mm-hmm.
everything that's happening. Do you ever have any conversations with them about that?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes, 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 about that. Because it's a great question, Angela. And the reason why that is so powerful is it is powerful. We know it's evidence-based. We know that relationship we're developing in those, the babies perceive things, and there's just more and more evidence that shows it's beneficial and valuable to be intentional about that. What I don't do is say scary stuff like, oh, and if you're anxious, it's going to ruin your baby's brain, but I try to stay away from that. But but definitely emphasizing the value. Babies know when they can experience light. They know what sounds are going on. They know if you ate something spicy. And they also know when you get cut off in traffic and you get that jolt of adrenaline, the baby feels that. And when your partner makes you laugh, and it's associated with your partner's voice, your partner feels that, their baby feels that. And so when your baby comes out and sees your partner and hears his voice, they're going to go, oh, you're the hilarious one. And they just can influence that so much. And I talk about the value of that. And I tell a couple of stories about that from my own experience and from clients' experience. And I find that storytelling in class is really helpful and keeps their attention a little bit. But also that relationship that they're cultivating with their baby has direct utility on their labor, not just like, oh, it's nice to have along, but it's really got direct utility during the labor. One of the tools that I'll give people to use is letting their baby know that everything's okay, because it changes their own body chemistry. And I tell them the story about this a flight attendant that I had, who was a client, a flight attendant who was afraid of flying. She was phobic, but she wasn't seeing me for that. She was seeing me because her feet hurt, and she needed to finish her last year of her flight attending work so she could get a retirement. I said, well, how do you manage being phobic of flying? And you've been doing this for 19 years. And she said, oh, well, it's my job to let everybody know that everything's okay. And so I do fine. I'm always standing at the entrance of the plane when people are getting on, and I look for the nervous person, and there's always one. And I say, you know what, you picked a great day to fly. And when the things get bumpy, I go and stand by their seat and I say, you feel those bumps up and down. This is letting you know how well designed this aircraft is. And, she told me these stories about how she did that. And she said, yeah, I just feel I do that. As long as I'm comforting someone, as long as I'm telling somebody everything's okay, I feel great. I feel fine. I do okay. And what I tell pregnant people is, and that's your job. When you are feeling distressed, that's your job. It changes your own body chemistry when you do that. The flight attendant, by the way, just did have to come back later after she retired, so she could use all those miles because it wasn't her job anymore. Now she was just like the weird lady sitting next to you on the plane going, it's okay. So she had to get some hypnotherapy then for the flying. But that's really relatable, but it also just ties together, right? We're not just tuning into our baby because a scientist over there said that's a good idea for our baby's brain. We're tuning into our baby because that's going to help us during labor. It's also helpful during the part where we're moving the baby out, because if you think about it, feelings of love promote feelings of elasticity, lubrication, warmth, circulation, blood flow. I mean, it all works together. So yeah, great question. Was there another question too that you had?
Angela, you had a follow-up about the voice.
Right. You teach them breathing exercises to relax the vocal cords.
Yes, I teach them a couple of them. One, because this is the throat. I'll teach you this little exercise. This is a singing lesson. This isn't the super relaxing one, but this is a singing lesson that I teach people when I'm teaching people how to work with this. You know, for those of you who've had a baby, then you're maybe familiar with this. For those of you who haven't, the thing is when this uterus is open and it's time for the baby to move down, there's this big feeling that's kind of like, it's a reflexive feeling of that baby moving down, and it can feel a little bit like we might want to tense up against it, but we want to relax into it, and we want to bear down, like we're just bearing down, and that it's everything's relaxing into that rather than resisting it. So what I'll have people do is make pretend that we'll do this now. I'll teach you. Pretend like we're all sitting in a room together, real close, like we're in a small room that we wouldn't want to be in really, but we're in that room and we just all ate something really gassy, and you don't want to let any of that out. So hold that like you're holding in some gas. Hold your bottom closed. That's right. Perfect. Keep that bottom nice and tight. Keep it nice and snug. And now make this sound with me. This is a singing lesson. I want you all to do it. Okay, got it, kid. Keep making that sound. Feel how easy it is to hold that real nice and tight. None of that gas is going to get out while you're making that sound. So now keep holding this No, keep holding that. But instead of making this sound, I want you to make your voice as low as you can go. Really hum as low as you can go. And it's much harder to hold that tight and tense when you're making that low vocal sound, right? So same thing when we are having a baby, is that we want to let this be soft and open and loose. When this voice box is open to make a deep sound, then that pelvic floor is open to let your baby out. And that's soft. That's all soft. That's all soft here. It's all soft down here. And so I don't tell people they have to hum through their birth, but that is a good illustration. And it ties into the actual breathing technique that they're going to be using to move their baby down. And they're going to be using some oomph and some strength to move their baby down too. But we want it to be the kind of oomph that's like an athlete, that's like, not the kind of oomph that's like, eh. So we want that to be moving down.
I have a feeling that when a lot of people hear about this, they have the idea that hypnobirthing is going to look something like this. Mother is in labor and Tracy Barrett Adams is standing over her.
Swinging a pendulum, yeah.
Or something like that. Do you ever attend a live birth?
Oh yeah, I have many times. I don't anymore, but I am a trained doula, a certified doula, which is a birth assistant. And so I have attended a number of births, and I use those stories in my teaching a lot, and I fold all those stories into my program, certainly. However, it's not something that I do now because it does take a lot of time. My primary mission and the primary purpose of the work that I do is to prepare people to have their babies on their own, to prepare. It's them that's having them. I don't attend births anymore because it became really clear to me, A, it was just an indefinite period of time that I would have to be available, and B, the things that I was teaching, that I was doing with them, they did not need me to do that with them. They were able to do that on their own. It was only their belief system that they needed me that was convincing them that, oh no, I really need the hypnotist. I mean, I've never regretted any of the births I've attended, but that's not my role. And I teach people the tools that are the one when I'm introducing them, I always say, now these are the tools that when I've attended births that made the nurses and stuff go, wow, everybody should have a hypnotist at their birth. I'm like, these are really easy, like letting your baby know that everything is okay. These are really easy. I've walked into innumerable birth rooms and said, let's let your baby know that everything's okay. And people do that. And the nurses go, oh, wow, a minute ago, she was panicked. And that's not a hard thing. And you don't need to be a hypnotherapist to say that. You don't have to be a hypnotherapist to learn it. However, my job is in those weeks beforehand, and anybody who's doing hypnosis for birth, their work is to let that help that mindset to be open to that. And so that means for most people, letting go of a lot of preconceptions, but yeah, not in the birth room me anymore. Although it's a thing that some people do. I know in the Pacific Northwest up here, I know 2 people who are hypnotherapists who are attending births as well. So it's a thing that people can do. It's just a different job, really. It's a different thing, you know.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot of people think that about dentistry as well. You know, I need to have go with me to the dentist and, you know, and be there for the procedure, because after all, they bring the mojo, you know.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yes.
Do you ever work with, so we talked about couples. Do other family members ever get involved in this as well?
They have done. I have had a number of grandmothers, you know, mothers coming in, and some sisters coming in, of course, and some best friends. And so, yes, there have been. The landscape has changed right now a bit, because I've always had a finite amount of space in my classroom, and my classes tend to fill up all of the seating that I have. And so if someone wants to bring an extra person, then they have to set that up in time, and then we'll make some space for them. And that might mean I have one less couple enrolled if we need to do that. And that's okay if we need to. I'm happy to accommodate that if that's important to a family. Now that we're online, and I'm doing all of my courses online and will be for the foreseeable future, I don't know that there's any reason not to have as many people as you want on board. I think the more the merrier, in a way. I think that that remains to be seen how that plays out. I just think that it is, you know, right now something that hasn't come up yet. But yep, that's absolutely, the more support, the better. However, one of the things that for couples, they, you know, to your question, Michael, one of the things that couples really will say is that doing this work together in a very focused way makes them stronger parents together, that they are working together on this project, getting ready, and that the partner really feels like they're involved. And people's relationships change when they have a baby. My after baby program, you asked about that, Michael. My after baby program, that's one of the things that we talk about, is how's the relationship change and what's happening here. And so the partners being really focused on that work is part of that. And so I would usually recommend to people that even if they've got a sister or mother or whatever, that they are keeping that little couple bond.
Yeah.
And doing as much with that as they can.
You know, as you talk about being online now, something that I'm remembering of the last month or so, at least, and I think this is one of the things that's changing now. But at the height of the pandemic, and this could happen again, mothers were going to hospitals to deliver their babies, and their partners weren't allowed to come in.
Yep. I have a client in New York who was a fertility client, and her husband was the last partner in before they said no partners. And they tried to kick him out, actually. And he said, well, I'm here. He had sort of snuck in. I don't know, he didn't sneak in literally, but he just kind of weaseled his way in, I think, on the entrance. And the nurse that was telling him to leave just said, okay, you can stay. But and that was only the case for about 10 days, I think, before they reversed that. And now that's by the Association of the CDC and the ACOG, American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology, have said, we're not doing that anymore. Everybody needs to have a partner. So
Right.
A partner or a doula. So that was and the other component is also, and a few other things in terms of what's been affecting and what still continues to be developing now, though, is our parents who are testing positive for COVID or showing symptoms, are they going to be separated from their babies or not? I'm having my parents practice in masks, because they're going to need to be doing that deep breathing in a mask potentially, because they're doing instant tests when parents go in, but they're not instant, still is a couple hours. And so they're keeping them masked for that time. So a lot of policies that are just almost changing week by week right now.
Sure.
Way to keep up with the times, though, and changing with the times, because teaching them to breathe with masks. Oh my God, of course.
Yeah.
We have to do that now. That's amazing, Tracy. I'm really impressed.
Yeah.
Well, it's just the thing that they're going to have to do. Yeah.
I'm always impressed with you, but I'm just saying, I mean, yes, of course, if we were doing that, we would think about that, but it's just something,
Right.
you don't even think about. Oh my God, of course you have to do that.
Yeah. And so,
amazing. And when you do after work, I know that there's couple work, that makes sense. But there are other things that happen when a new baby comes into the older child,
oh
other
yeah.
twins fall out at the same time, as you know. All sorts of things happen unexpectedly, or even if it's expected, reactions after the fact happen. And do you work with these couples?
Oh yeah, I have a whole program for that. But then, I mean, I have a whole program for that, and I have an online session that I do with all of my parents. That is just a group session, but they are going home with resources, and it's so I'm going to answer that in two ways. One, yes, I work with parents who are just dealing with those expected changes, right? We're not getting enough sleep. There's this whole other human in the house that we don't know, and just one issue that comes up often is bonding. We've done this work, we're talking to our baby, we're connecting with our baby beforehand, and a lot of people have an expectation, because it's the popular notion, and it's often true, that baby's going to come out of me, be placed on my chest, and suddenly a rainbow will go from here to here, a door will open inside me, and the most magnificent love I've ever known, but a completely new kind of love, is going to flood me, and I will recognize it immediately, and then the birds will start to sing. And
Well, I know that's true. I've seen that on television.
But what they don't tell you is that only lasts until your nipples get really sore from yours.
or that sometimes, I mean, the story that I think there's more pressure on that now than there was, like for you and I, Karen, with that. I remember I never heard of bonding with your baby before. And I remember my baby was born, and my very first thought was, oh, she looks like Winston Churchill. And I was a little disappointed, frankly. And then some time went by, and 3 days later, when my mother arrived from San Francisco, I was like, this is my baby. You go cook something, Mom. I'm good. And I was completely in love with her. My colleague, Kira, that we developed this postpartum program together, she had a lot of kind of expectation about what she would feel when her first thought, she had twins, first off, and the first baby was placed on her, and she said, her first thought was, he's gooey. And her second thought was, I'm supposed to kiss him. And her third thought was, I suck at this. And so it really, unlike my experience where I just kind of got over it, and then it was really tricky for her to not feel what she expected to feel. So we do talk about beforehand and afterwards about what it means to move into this new relationship that might be Cinderella, like it might be love at first sight, or it might be a little more Beauty and the Beast, or, anything in between, and that's all okay. And discussing what normal is, lowering the stakes on feeling a certain thing, and knowing that as couples are moving through this, and certainly for single people, that we all know this as hypnotists, right? The lack of sleep and the effect that can have on every system in our thinking, in our body. So working with people not to get better sleep, because they're probably not going to, right? Because they have a baby waking them up every couple hours. But how do you function on less sleep? How do you get sips of rest through the day, even if you can't get the sleep that you need? How do you restore your mental clarity, your emotional steadiness through those early weeks? That's a big those are going to be the big topics that I work with people on.
This is amazing to me, because I have a feeling, like I said, that most people think about this probably the way that I used to think about it, and that it was just about getting through the day, getting through
Right.
the birth itself, and God, what a rich field, and from a business standpoint, by the way,
Yes.
we're talking about multiple sessions and stuff, and nurturing a community in a really cool way.
And a community that's comfortable talking about their experience, right? Now, I live in Seattle, where maybe people are more reserved. I don't know, but people are not always talking about things. But mothers to be, people who are trying to get pregnant, people who have little babies, they talk to each other and they contribute support to each other. They throw support each other's way. So it's been a great, for me, because I started doing this right when I began doing, in the first year of working with hypnosis, of being a professional hypnotherapist. And I feel like doing this work gives you such credibility, really, in the medical community locally. Like it's been a huge source of referrals for me. And a great number of the clients that I see for birth are there because they've attended a birth of somebody who's using hypnosis for birth. They're a nurse, they're a midwife, something like that. And so they're coming in. When I developed my program, I was fortunate to have a midwife and a doctor who had both been through my course who said, oh, let me help you. Let me help you put that together. So those are the kinds of connections that they just kind of fall into your lap, and people are motivated to have help moving through there, even if the parents you're seeing are just, like you said, Michael, focused on that day and getting through that day. They all benefit from having their eyes open to the fact that they're going to do better if they're self-regulating, if they're shifting their mindset and their set of expectations.
Do mothers ever come back for their second baby, or once
All the
they
time.
know it, they know it?
Oh yeah, no, they come back. They come back all the time. Sometimes they come back and do the whole shebang again, and sometimes they come back for a private session or two.
Zoilita wants to go all the way back now to fertility and talk about that. Zoilita, you got some questions. Sounds better if you open your mic and ask those.
So my daughter turns 40 in July. She had 2 babies at 17 and 23. She married her second husband, and she's madly in love with him. And they had a little girl who is 2.5, and she's just beginning fertility treatments. They've been trying to get pregnant for a year. The fertility place says that she has a low egg count. And she was about to begin the injections, and they discovered a cyst on her ovary. So they have to deal with that before they go on. So I know from my intuitive self that hypnosis will be very effective. I also know she's never going to let me do that with her in a way that's comfortable. But you mentioned that there's research. Where can I get a hold of some research?
I'll send it to you. I will tell you that the research is a little old, but there was a study done, and it was really the study is actually specifically relating to in vitro fertilization, which your daughter's not there, but it's where.
But that's what she's moving into.
Okay, and it was a study done in Israel of a group that it was people who were doing hypnosis, and I should know the number, but I can't remember the number, but it was a striking difference in the people who were using hypnosis. Now, were they using hypnotherapy, or were they listening to some recordings that were relaxing them? That's the piece I'm not sure about that study, but
so do you do that direct kind of work? Like, could I give you as a referral to her?
Sure.
Okay.
I work with clients, and I'm also, I work with clients online all over the world for sure, and have a program with recordings and things. But for people, obviously, like hypnotherapy for fertility, like a situation like your daughter, Zoilita, that is almost always going to benefit from releasing a certain amount of emotional baggage that comes with trying, and directing resources to the body, directing resources to those ovaries in a really specific kind of way that's specific to the individual.
Is your website your name?
It's not. Cornerstone, my website for clients right now is cornerstonehypnotherapy.com.
Cornerstone. Okay. Well, great. I'm so glad that I attended.
Me too.
Me too. Everything works out the way it's supposed to, doesn't it, Zoilita? Things just fall into place.
So did you say cornerstone.com?
Cornerstonehypnotherapy.com.
Okay.
Who knows what, you could probably get to church if you did cornerstone.com.
So Scott Babb has a question as well, and in fact it's one that it's kind of dear to my heart. I'm really curious. So Scott, you want to open up your microphone?
Me too. Yeah.
Would they ever let Michael do this? Not really the question, but the question is actually, what's the acceptance of male hypnotists, hypnotherapists among, I mean, obviously people don't call you up and probably don't say, I'm so glad you're not a man. But if a man becomes a specialist in hypnofertility, hypnobirth, everything around making and delivering babies and making sure that everyone's happy, is there a chance that they will actually have a decent clientele?
I would say yes, particularly around the fertility. In the birth world, I do think there's an element, you'd have, in the birth world, it would depend, in just childbirth preparation, it would depend on your location. If you would have acceptance if you were in a place where there weren't a lot of other practitioners doing hypnosis for birth. Being female, I think is an advantage with that. With hypnosis for fertility, I don't think it makes a bit of difference. I think it's, do you have the skill, are you perceived as having the skill set that you need to do the hypnosis and the hypnotherapy with people? I think that is, in terms of, to your question about marketing or being accepted in the community, I think that the fertility, absolutely, and the childbirth would be a little bit conditional. It would take more time to build. It's just, there'd be a rarer bird.
Isn't it
There's
interesting
hope
that
for us, Michael.
years ago, at least when I had my daughter, all the OBGYNs were male.
Yes, me too.
Not so much anymore, but back then.
Yeah, back then. And everybody, there was, in my practice, one woman OBGYN in the group that I saw, and she wasn't my OBGYN.
Yeah.
And
it's just interesting that the doctors can be male, but now that we think about men doing hypnobirthing, that seems weird or funny.
Well, I think that's because, and I would say in a kind of a broad sense, and I think this is really also a little bit regional, probably really depends a bit, but the birth community, midwives and doulas and now OBGYNs, is predominantly female, not researchers necessarily, but the community at large. So in terms of making referrals, it would be a little bit, I just think it would be that much more challenging to gain. It wouldn't be impossible. In the Puget Sound Birth Professionals group, for instance, which is a Facebook group that I'm an active part of, there are a couple of male doulas, birth assistants, who do a hopping great business. Yeah. And I am sure that they had a strategy for that, and part of that was probably a real commitment to make that work, and probably part of that was doing really good work and getting referrals.
Yeah, I know a man who's a midwife in the UK, mm-hmm. And I think my memory is that I think when he started out, it took him quite a while to get that established. But now, on the other hand, he's kind of a real sort of stands out specialist, maybe even because he's
right. I think that the people there's in that group, that one group too, there's a one of the people is also a female pelvic floor physical therapist, a specialist in that area. And there are a lot of women who do that, but he is probably the most go-to person. And part of that is he does a lot of active advocacy work for women in the birth environment. So he's really made himself very much known and trusted in the birth community.
There may be another way to look at this. Does it take a special kind of person to do this work? And if the male or the female is called to this kind of work, they can probably make it work. Does it, Tracy, take a special kind of person?
Well, I'm gonna break that down just a little bit. That's a good question. Because we're really talking about the sort of reproductive thing as if it's one big umbrella, and it is kind of, but in there, the hypnotherapy for fertility and the childbirth preparation and the postpartum, those are really three such distinct things. I think the fertility piece, I think the only thing that you need that's special is anybody who's already a hypnotherapist or practicing some medical hypnotherapy. The main skills you need are to be able to listen, to be able to ask your client, well, what should be happening, and to be able to work through with them the emotional blocks and the any other obstacles that there may be, and then know enough about the physiology of what should be happening to give suggestion to promote that. So with childbirth, the special part is that we're doing, unlike with fertility, is that we are educating too. We're doing some teaching. So you kind of have to have that skill to be a bit of a teacher, and to be able to, whether you're working privately with people or or in groups to be able to communicate information in a way that's orderly and makes sense and holds the attention. So it's not just that resolution work with hypnosis. And to my mind, that's the big distinction. And then again, in the postpartum work, it's probably more like the fertility work. Having a good base of knowledge and information is helpful at passing some of that along, and really, though, dealing with what's facing the person in front of you. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm a little curious. Well, first of all, Angela had a question. I think if we can get her in here, and Chris, if you still got a question, you had your hand up a while back, and you still have a question? Okay. So Angela, can you open up your microphone and ask your question?
Mine goes back to the getting no sleep, and can you make those 10-minute baby breaks feel like a good night's rest?
Yes, that's the thing. That's the thing. I work with sleep is a huge chunk of my practice. So insomnia is one of the things that I work with a lot. And so working with making the most of limited sleep is a pretty natural transition into working with that postpartum time. You know, however much we're doing that, you still wouldn't want to necessarily operate heavy machinery on, 45 minutes of sleep in a 24-hour period, but you can have more emotional resources, be less frayed. One of the things, I'm going to give you a little bit of a long answer to that. One of the things that we do after we have a baby, hormonally, there's all this stuff happening where we become a lactation factory, and we're making milk and taking care of this new person, getting to know this person that we're supposed to be falling in love with. And what happens is we get tired, that baby's not sleeping, and the baby does go to sleep for a while. The baby is taking a nap. We've got all this nervous energy that's come from us being awake for too long. We've got all this adrenaline that our body's been pumping out to help us gut it out. And so then we go to try to sleep, and we're like, I can't. I better just get up and look at some emails or something. And then the baby wakes up, and we are still we're getting a little bit more underwater with not having had the rest that we need. And so what I will have people do is throughout their day, no matter what else is going on, that they will really consciously, proactively take themselves into a restful state and activate their pleasure centers of their brain and take little sips of rest. And when they get that moment, when that baby's taking that rest and nap, that they can then extend that little sip of rest into a really good self-hypnotic rest. And even if they do have to go check their email, or they want to go clean their kitchen or something, or they want to fold some laundry, that they've dialed down their whole system into a really restful state. But taking those little sips through the day makes it possible to do that. The system, when we haven't had enough sleep, it just keeps giving us that adrenaline until we tell it to stop. If we haven't had enough sleep, it's just that natural response sets us up into that cycle of, adrenaline makes us more sensitive, and so when we're more sensitive, we get into that vigilance cycle. So that's basic strategy.
This whole childbirth thing sort of boils over into all sorts of other specialties. You already mentioned sleep and that kind of thing. Pain. We so closely associate childbirth and pain. They talk about how much pain a woman's in all the time. So that's one of the things I'm sure you do with a woman, is tell her that it doesn't have to be painful. Mine wasn't, thanks to Lamaze. And that's one of the things that a belief that I took into it. But do you deal with other sorts of pain, Tracy, migraine and other things in the same way you deal with childbirth pain? Is it all pain, or are there different techniques, different ways you handle the different kinds of pain?
I would say there are different ways of handling that, in the sense that, so yes, when we're dealing with labor pain, we're looking at something that we don't know what it's going to feel like when I'm actually working with the person, because everybody's nervous system is a little bit different. So I have to prepare them with something. We have to prepare that person for something that they're going to be doing on their own, that's going to help them ride those waves. And so I'm giving them tools that are flexible and not so specific. But the thing about chronic pain, or pain that the client comes in with, like they've just had this knee operated on and they want to not take those opioids anymore, and or they've got a chronic pain in their back, is that we can deal with that what's happening in the office and work with it, and know that with every pain we have some version of adrenaline that's activating, and we have some version of fear in response to that. Like Scott Sandlin says, you know, it's fear of this only getting worse or fear that it'll never get better. And we can work with the sensation, we can work with the fear, we can work with the relaxation. And then in that session, we're going to have a reduction, and then the client can connect to that reduction, right? So in preparation for birth, we're maybe using some of those same tools, but they're not getting to really have the experience of what does that feel like, what is that like, until they're on that day. And the difference between those, that sort of natural cycle, working with clients who are already experiencing some discomfort, where they maybe have some physical tension associated with that fear, that adrenaline, with labor, that fear that comes from the adrenaline, from the pain, causes the inner layer of the uterus to constrict. And that inner layer needs to soften for baby to come out. And so that's where we need that conditioned response that's established way ahead of time, so that when they have that sensation that this inner layer, instead of going into spasm, instead of all that adrenaline, that the woman has learned to anchor that endorphin state, has learned to anchor that comfort response that comes when that athletes get, but to be able to produce it more or less on demand. So a little bit reversed, right? Than the way a little bit different than we would. So the techniques themselves are different too, right? They're a little bit less direct with birth, because we're preparing a versatile tool. We're not saying, and what's that feel like now? And how's that feeling now?
Cool.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay. I tell you what I really wonder. I think there might be some people that, whether they're on this call or they hear this later, and maybe they're just starting out in hypnosis, and they think, gosh, this sounds like something I really might like to add to what I do. What kind of advice would you give to people that are just right there, where they're like, I don't know how to proceed, I don't know how to start, it seems like it's got to be just wonderful.
Well, I can give you a few different thoughts about that. Is it okay to plug my own courses?
Yeah, feel free.
Because I do have some courses, but for people who are wanting to just start out, I mean, honestly, these are these are all related areas and really distinct as well. So there are topics, and there's some literature, some books to read, but I would think for any of these, really taking some version of I just think these are areas where taking some version of a course that's going to be preparatory is helpful. It's a specialty, not unlike, Roger Moore and I were just talking the other day about dementia. It's like there's some things that you just kind of want to have a base of knowledge before walking into that. And these are areas that I would want to do that. So there are some, different organizations that do have, and different teachers who teach those things. I have the Hypnomothering is my program, and I teach a 2-day certification course on fertility, and I teach a 2-day certification course on childbirth, and a 1-day on the postpartum program. So those are all online. But there are other
Hypnotherapy.com, I believe. Is that right?
Hypnomothering.com.
Oh,
Yep.
different. Okay. Hypnomothering.com.
Hypnomothering.com, not hypnobirthing, hypnomothering.com.
Okay.
And the program that I teach is not hypnobirthing with a capital B. Hypnobirthing with a capital B is through the Hypnobirthing Institute. That's the Marie Mongan method, and certainly there's a childbirth education offered through that, as well as Hypnobabies, as well as
you mentioned Sherry Gilbert.
Yeah, I don't think she used to be affiliated with the Hypnobirthing Institute, but I don't think that she is anymore. And I don't know that she's still teaching her fertility program, although she might still be making that available to groups.
Right.
And Lindsay
Eastburn.
Thank you. She has a fertility program as well.
Right.
And my childbirth program is specifically made for hypnotherapists or people who are certified hypnotists. So one of the things, and that I think is what distinguishes it. There are a few other things, but that's really what I like about it the most, is that it's set up for, it's a little less programmatic. It's a little bit more like you can use this as a program, or you can just fold this into your practice however you want to, which most of us who are hypnotherapists or hypnotists or entrepreneurs some people want to be affiliated with something that's more programmatic, and some people want to have tools that they can make their own. So there's kind of both options available.
How many
Tracy,
sessions for
what was
hypnobirthing?
there again? Can you mention the name that you named 3 classes or 3 courses? Can you just repeat them?
That are mine or the other
Yours.
hypnomothering.com. I have fertility and childbirth and postpartum.
Thank you.
Lovely.
And somebody else was asking a question too that I missed it.
I was, and I lost it.
Okay.
Go ahead, Michael.
Well, okay. Well, I'm just curious about one other thing, and it's kind of it's not all the wonderful things that you shared about, but I have a feeling that this particular job also carries with it some some unique challenges. So what's the most challenging aspect of doing this work?
That's a really good question, and I could answer it a few different ways. I think that the most challenging and wonderful aspect, I'm just going to talk about the fertility piece for a moment,
Okay.
is that people are coming in often, unlike the birth people who are coming in almost all maybe scared but excited. And the fertility people are often coming in at the end of their hope of what they thought their life would be, what they want their life to be. They are often coming in not just changing their identity, but feeling like they're losing their sense of their future that they had planned. And often are coming in, not always, but often coming in a just story that comes to mind is someone who came in sitting on the couch, just like made herself into a pretzel, and her legs were in a pretzel, and she wouldn't look at me, and she was looking down, and she's like, well, I guess I'm just doing this because I just tried everything else, and just going to try this. She was not into it. And the most wonderful thing for me about that is knowing that part in that person who wants to be a parent, who wants to be a mother, who feels that drive and that desire, has that, and that what we're going to do together is help breathe life into that, whether she gets pregnant or not, that part of her that she feels like she's losing or has lost by not being pregnant, that she gets to find that part. And that's really the project that we're working on. And that is just an exquisitely wonderful, rewarding thing. And it's really interesting because it is never the same on any 2 people. It is never the same. It is always a journey that is fascinating and about listening and learning about that person, and in using all the creativity that comes with hypnotherapy to tap into that resource. So kind of a long answer, but
Yeah, well,
it's just about that area.
that's
You've
great.
talked a couple of times about programs. Is there a set number of sessions that you encourage your students and that you do with your clients when you're doing hypnobirthing or
Yes.
hypnomothering?
Yes, for the childbirth side, yes, for the childbirth education side, I will encourage people typically, I guess I'll put it, I'm going to answer this in a couple different ways, but my program that I teach my clients is a 6-session series. And this is the one that I have found to be the most popular way to do it in Seattle, Washington. It's popular, and that's in part because there are other programs that offer 5 sessions, and people want to do one that this is longer. It must be better. So I just like giving people that extra practice time. Also popular, and really equally popular, has been to do it in 4 sessions. And we can cover really all the material in 4 sessions. There's just less spaciousness for practice. I prefer the spaciousness for practice. I think mostly people prefer it too. However, I do offer it both ways, or I have, and now that we're online, I'm not where else are people going to go? But I have offered it both ways. And I've also offered it as a weekend intensive. So a Saturday and then another Saturday that people are kind of with me all day. And that's been a thing that's been very popular. And people have had positive experiences with it. So those 2 weekends sessions are those 2 Saturdays, or it's a very not condensed all the materials there, but it's a very snug day on both days. And then the 6 sessions, it's just a lot more room to have, a lot more questioning room, a lot more time to practice together. So
You work mostly with groups?
With birth, I work mostly with groups. I do see people privately, usually privately if they have some weird schedule thing, like one of them's an EMT or something, or they have schedules that they just do shift work. It's not possible. And then also I work privately with people who have some special medical situation where they're just not going to fit in with the group, and they maybe are going to have this, they know they're going to have a surgical birth maybe. And so they're going to be preparing specifically some techniques for that to help them prepare for that. Or they know, and maybe they've had a real serious trauma with their first birth, and they're coming in for their second birth. They might really benefit from some specific hypnosis that's geared for processing that. It just also brings to mind, Karen, you had the question about the time after birth. So it's that totally normal making that adjustment. But there's also that group of people who've had a surprise surgical birth. They've had an emergency that's come up. They've had something that's come up that they weren't expecting, or there's been a problem with the baby, or there's been a problem with the mother's health afterwards. And so those are also things that I often, well, not too often, thankfully, but I'm always prepared to work with people on. And that's really valuable too.
It is concerning because if you work with somebody from getting them pregnant, by the way, I'm interested in the marketing on that. Tell me, let the hypnotherapist get you pregnant. It's probably not the marketing method.
That is what the people say when I have them in childbirth classes. I'll usually say, what brings you, why would you choose this? And people will say, well, Tracy got me pregnant. Tracy got us pregnant. So they do say that. But I don't say that. I would say just, we talk about this arc of fertility through childbirth. I would say probably all of my fertility clients end up in my childbirth classes. But if I'm running, I will usually run two full classes that start a month. And I might have a fertility client in one, we'll start in a class in a month. So it's not the majority of those clients that are fertility clients. Just the group classes are much more affordable, and many people want to take them, and not everybody who's trying to get pregnant is, I might see even if I see a number of new fertility clients a month, that doesn't translate into that many that are going to be in those birth classes. But yeah, in terms of the marketing of that, people who are trying to get pregnant talk to each other on support boards, and hypnosis is known to help. And people are looking for people are Googling it. People are looking for it. I have it on my website that it's one of the things I specialize in, and people have no problem finding me. And before, even newer in my practice, and people were finding me for that because they're looking for it. And now really they're looking for it because the internet, Facebook groups, people talk about it. That one person who got pregnant went back to her doctor in New York, and the doctor, I think, has a support group or something, and all of those, it's just been a steady stream from that. So just saying, every doctor who's working with assistive reproductive technology like IVF or in vitro fertilization wants their patient to be successful. So they all want it to work, and they want whatever support they can give their patients for it to work. And so unlike whatever conspiracy theories we might have about big medical industry or whatever, saying, no, don't go get hypnotherapy for your migraines because then you won't need me anymore, which I don't stand behind, by the way, but I'm just saying that some people say that or think that. Well, there's not a chance of that with fertility, because these fertility doctors put their success numbers on their website. That's what they're selling. So every advantage they can recommend to their patients, they're going to.
Mm.
Yeah. I hate to take this on a negative bent, but has it happened to you? I can imagine that it might, where you work with someone helping them with fertility, and then through the birth, and then everything goes bad. Stillborn birth, birth defects, other things like that, and the parent is still there with you. You're their support system.
Knock wood. Haven't had that happen. I have had some people go through my childbirth class, and have a loss or have a defect. And I would say I'm not really their support system, that I'm part of what they're doing in their preparation is to be their own support system. I do hear, I'm not kidding, when I say this. When I first used to teach hypnosis for birth, I used to hear sort of people who were disappointed or upset in their experiences from a few different ways. And one of them was if something really went askew. And my feeling is, just in my experience, that having the capacity to self-regulate, to create space for discussion and conversation, to have difficult conversations with their providers, it's not going to make the experience of a loss easy or positive, but people are consistently talking about how much easier it was for them to move through this, that they had conversations or went through things they didn't think they would have been able to do without those tools, to be able to relax, to be able to give themselves room for those conversations. So those are difficult topics. It's not something that, thankfully, it's not something that's come up a lot, but it has in some cases. And the value, again, of being centered and calm and grounded is going to be felt doubly in a tricky situation like that.
And would you take on that mother or that family as a private client then at
Oh,
that
sure.
point? Or would you refer them off to a grief specialist?
Well, it would depend on their situation, right? It would depend on what they were dealing with. Most of the time, honestly, by the time I would say absolutely, I would expect that person to have the support of a grief specialist. So I might see that person a little bit after a little bit of processing. I have had a few occasions where I've had some traumatic birth experiences where I was the first person they called. And so my response to that is to do, and they're already used to me, we already know each other. So I might do some work with them on their way as a stopgap, because it can take some time sometimes to get into a therapist. It can take some time. I do think that there's room in that space for more than one kind of therapy. But if there's been a loss, certainly being with other parents who have experienced something similar, just that kind of support is really valuable. And there are tools and counsel that someone who is licensed and trained in that field is going to be able to give that I can't. But certainly having being able to, what my experience has been with one person was that she felt she couldn't breathe. And so I said, well, okay, well, let's breathe. And so we can get to that place where we can breathe and know that the next thing is going to be something else, but just to get to that place.
Great. We've got a couple of questions that are sort of backing up. So, and by the way, I want to make sure that you know, Tracy, that we are aware of this, and I want to let everybody else know too, if they're going to get their questions in. I understand that you have to be somewhere as soon as we're done.
I do. I have a class. I have 16 expectant parents that are going to be waiting on a Zoom meeting for me.
So we want to make sure that we don't hold you over. But Angela asked a question earlier that I thought was interesting, and I'd like to just take it one step further. She just said, when you were talking about the fertility patient, you mentioned the part of her that wants to be a mother. And so Angela's question was, do you incorporate parts work? And my question on top of that is in fact what you do a unique toolbox, or does it utilize all of the traditional skills that are in a hypnotist toolbox to begin with?
Yes, and I wouldn't say I always do parts work with a person, or certainly not always formal parts work, but always utilizing in a really client-centered way. What is the client saying, and what is the client needing in that work to resolve wherever they are right now, whatever's getting in their way right now, into the way that they want or need to feel.
Yeah.
And when we're looking at having a baby, if we're feeling in that person I was describing who was in that really dark place, even though she was in that really dark place, she was sitting in my office. There was a part of her that was ready to be pregnant and ready to be a mother. And so that's the part of her that we need to connect to. Now, did we set that up as formal parts therapy? I don't remember with that particular person, but we did some version of, that part of you, probably some version of, you know, that part of you that's ready to be that, you know. And she might, and I just my memory of that person might have said something more like, no, I don't know. I think it took some time. This was someone who was actually going to a different country for IVF because it's so expensive. This is one of the things that is a big deal. It's very expensive here in the US to do that kind of treatment. It's much cheaper to go to different countries to do that. And this was someone who was going to a different country. And when she saw me 3 sessions, and on the way out the door for her, she was literally leaving on a jet plane the next day to go do her IVF. She said, well, I don't know if I'm going to get pregnant, but I know I'm going to be okay. And it was like, that's
Great.
Awesome. And it was from that part of her having permission to grow and be okay and thrive, and knowing that there would be one direction if she became a parent and another direction if she did not.
Great.
And she did. And she was in my class, and she has the cutest baby. So yeah, that is, so, you know, I guess really to answer your question about tools and using hypnotist tools, it is using, I would say, the full range of whatever, and I would say this to anybody who's interested in getting into this line, where are your strengths as a hypnotherapist? It's that, your strong suits. How are you most comfortable working?
Mm-hmm.
And then really having some specific knowledge about what some common issues are that people are dealing with fertility. And it's just not always the same thing. Sometimes it's easy to make assumptions, and it's just often, you know, people are coming in with such individual landscapes to be able to listen to that.
Yeah. Nice. And just another question, Chris Darby wanted to know, and you seem to be well researched, Tracy. I love this about you. She's wanting to know, do you know what the success rate is for hypnosis and fertility?
Well, I don't know what the success rate is for hypnosis and fertility. I know how successful my clients have been, but I don't think that speaks probably for the whole field. The study that I've got to find that study. I'm sorry, I should have looked that. Oh, maybe it's in here. It's probably in these papers somewhere. That it's probably in this is why it's probably in this book somewhere that I wrote a while ago. But I think that my understanding was, and I'm making this up based on my memory, so don't quote me on this, but my understanding was from that Israeli study that was done a number of years ago, that it was about a 50% improvement in 50% difference. I am not sure that that's right. That might have been a lower number, but that's what's in my mind. It was a significant number. Maybe it was 30. I'm bad with numbers. I'm sorry. But I think that, so I'm not really answering your question, but it was significant. It was a significant enough and notable enough difference that it really got people's attention at the time when that study came out. And my experience anecdotally has been very good. It's been very strong. And usually I sometimes see people who are doing natural cycle fertility. That means they are not doing any other thing. They're just like, well, I'm like Zoilita's daughter, maybe, you know, like I'm 40 and trying to get pregnant and never been pregnant, or I've been pregnant before, I'm trying to do it again, but I don't really want to, not ready for the medical stuff yet. And we're just priming and creating as hospitable an environment as we can, moving through any blocks. And then, you know, and most people though are also seeing an acupuncturist. They also may be doing Mayan abdominal massage. They also may be really doing a lot of research themselves. So those are hard numbers to pin down, right? I think now.
Scott had a question. Actually had a little challenge with your website. I'm wondering.
Oh, really?
Do we have an email address for you that he could check in with you at?
Tracy@hypnomothering.com.
Tracy@hypnomothering.com. It's a lovely name.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, we're just a few minutes away from the end here. We've got time maybe for one last question. If somebody has a burning.
I really feel like it would be a great time for Tracy to leave us really uplifted. I feel responsible for taking us down that negative rabbit hole with the question that I felt important to ask. And so now would you leave us in the last couple of minutes, and it's your time deadline, so I know that you can fit it in, with your most uplifting, heartwarming birthing.
Okay. Yes. so it's sort of a quiet coming into the evening, because for some of you it's nighttime, so I don't want to wake you up too much. So we'll do something a little bit, little middle ground on that. So uplifting and calming and quieting. So, but this is something that I do as a little fear release as part of my course. Right after we've talked about having difficult conversations with your doctor. If you know, just those things about setting things up ahead of time, so that and some people find even talking to their doctor is intimidating or a little nervous making. So we do this little exercise, and it's something they can do on the fly. So I'll do it all with you. So what I'd love for you to do is just take a moment and close your eyes and notice how you're feeling emotionally right now. We were just talking about some kind of hard things and some things that can be really difficult for people, for our clients, or maybe there's even something difficult in your own life you've been experiencing. We're thinking about the things in the world that have been creating some tension. And whether there's anything like that or not, maybe you're feeling great, just notice how you are feeling right now. And as you notice how you're feeling, just kind of being with that. And I'm going to take a series of breaths now. I'm going to direct these breaths. We're going to breathe in some different ways. First, I'm going to have you just pretend like you're breathing from your feet all the way up into your chest, like you're filling your lungs, like you're at the ocean. It's the best air ever. And just let that out with a sigh. Just release, relax, release. Now you've already connected in with your body. You've noticed how you are feeling. You've connected to those natural, normal, positive feelings in your body. Now I'd like you to take another breath, breathing all the way up into your brain, like you're clearing your head. Really take that breath way up high into your brain and release. Let that go. Now already in hypnosis, just a little bit, just with that imaginative breathing, and let's extend that now. And focus on your heart, maybe placing your left hand over your heart and breathing into this heart space. And you're all hypnotists, you probably already know that when you breathe imaginatively like this, that your heart rate naturally falls into a more ideal resting rate. And those wonderful entrainment qualities of your heart send that message to your breathing slows down. And your brain naturally entrains to that slower rate, that more ideal rate. So allow to come to mind now, with all of this in place, as you keep breathing through your heart. Imagine and allow a memory of a yes moment in your life to float into your mind. Maybe a moment of laughter or joy, or that wonderful parking place you found that real busy day. Whatever it is in your mind that says yes. And you know, as you do this, you're activating this chemistry and you're breathing it through your body. You're teaching your body something. So focus on your heart space. Breathe. And consider how you'd like to feel in about half an hour. Maybe it's about what you want to be doing, or the things you want to be thinking about, or the way you want to feel. And breathe this intention through your heart space, knowing that you're taking with it that yes, breathing your intention and that yes chemistry and the power of your mind and body connecting, setting a compass for this next little while that you've chosen and that you've directed. And that's something that you can do anytime, just by noticing how you feel, tuning into it, filling your lungs and releasing, clearing your head, releasing, and tuning into that heart space. So now just wiggle your toes and wiggle your fingers, come all the way into the room and take a nice refreshing breath, make some jazz hands, make all the way up.
Oh, great.
Right.
It
Lovely.
was wonderful.
So Tracy, we have run past the time, and I know you got.
I got those people are going to be there. I told them 7:05, so
Okay.
I got to get off.
Watch this. Hang on. Buckle your seatbelt. I want
All
to remind everybody CEUs. So claim your CEUs. Look for the recording tomorrow around about noon if you're interested in that. And now what we're going to do, Tracy, just to send you off with all the love and support and thanks and appreciation that we can, we're going to open everybody's microphones so that we can just all say good night to you, and then we will sign off. So microphones are, oops.
Good night.
Good night. Thank
Night.
you, Tracy.
So
So
much.
much, Tracy. That was
It's
wonderful.
been really
Thank
fun.
you.
Thank you.
Love to
Bye.
your
Nice
good
to
work.
see you.
You're
Thank
awesome,
you.
Tracy. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
God bless.
See
Stay
you.
safe.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye. Good night.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Karen.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you guys for being here. See you next month.
All right. Bye.